New Line Cinema. Now, if you grew up in the 80s through the early 2000s, then you already know about this film company. Never considered a big dog like Warner Brothers or Universal, New Line Cinema did a great job carving out their own little niche in the market. Robert Shaye founded New Line Cinema in the late 60s and used it as a vehicle to buy the rights to older films like Reefer Madness and redistribute them. Eventually, they distributed newer films at the time like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then The Evil Dead. Over time, they started to produce their own films, which all started with low-budget horror and eventually produced and released masterpieces and box office juggernauts like The Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, success isn't eternal. Robert Shaye and his wife stepped down from the company and sold it to Warner Brothers in 2008, where it is still technically alive, but it's a shell of its former self. New Line Cinema first tasted success as a film producer with the release of A Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984. The Freddy Krueger series was the lifeblood of the company for many years to come. New Line is often referred to as the house that Freddy built. Well, before Krueger, there was another horror film that was laying down the foundation well before the Dream Demon was even home. That film, of course, is Alone in the Dark. Now, why don't more people know about this lesser talked about horror film? Well, sometimes movies get buried by the sands of time. Whether the movie came out at the wrong time, didn't have the market push it needed to be successful, or just failed to make an impact on moviegoers, some films are just destined to failure and obscurity. For whatever reason, some movies get lost, just go unseen, or just not remembered. And that's the case with 1982's Alone in the Dark, not to be confused with the computer game or the 2005 film with the same name but totally different concepts. Alone in the Dark did get a DVD release in 2005 and then again in 2007 as part of a 4-movie pack. The prices for those started getting out of hand. Now, I needed to see this movie, but there was no way I was spending upwards of $30 to $40+ on a rough transfer of this film. I wanted it on Blu-ray so badly that I made a video about forgotten horror films that desperately need a Blu-ray release, and it topped my list. Well, in 2021, my prayers were answered. The lovely people at Scream Factory gave it the Blu-ray treatment, and it was one of the best releases of that year. I'm a little late to the party, but I'm so excited to review this one, and I hope you are too. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. It's a shame Alone in the Dark was so hard to obtain for so long, because this has everything you want in a horror film. You have Donald Pleasence playing a doctor of the psychotic Mad Men. Yeah, you heard that right. I said Mad Men. There are multiple psychotic killers in this. Even one of them wears a goalie hockey mask, and this was 1982, the same year Jason donned his own famous hockey mask. There's also gore effects by Tom Savini. It was directed by Jack Shoulder, who directed A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, probably the most underrated and underappreciated sequel of its time. It also has a brief appearance of Lynn Shay, who was in A Nightmare on Elm Street and the focal point of the Insidious films. Alone in the Dark is 1 part slasher, 1 part home invasion, and all parts awesome. The film starts at a small diner named Mom's. Notice how the opening scene is drenched in red and green lighting. Is this an omen to what is to come for New Line Cinema, perhaps? Well, this opening sequence is a dream. The preacher walks into the diner, asks for the usual, rain falls from the ceiling, and we see the chef, played by the horror legend, Donald Pleasence himself. A fiery inferno burns behind him. Is this more foreshadowing of Freddy Krueger, perhaps? Then chains grab the preacher. Wait, now is this foreshadowing Hellraiser? I guess my theory ends here. Donald grabs a big old knife and goes to chop the preacher in two from the groin, and before it hits, the preacher wakes up screaming. We get a nice Dutch angle of the hallway of the mental institution as a rocking synth score further sets the tone over the opening credits. Dan Potter, no relation to Harry, comes to the Haven an experimental new age mental institution to help with Dr. Leo Bain. When he goes into the building, he talks to the receptionist, played by a young Lin Shaye, and we get this funny piece of dialogue.
I hope I can still see him.
I'm afraid you can't see Dr. Bain. You can't see him at all.
Why, isn't he here?
No, he's here.
Do you have any idea when he'll be free?
Leo's always free.
Is he free now?
He's always free.
Then why can't I see him?
Because he's invisible.
Now, while I praise this film, there's no doubt that some aspects just haven't aged well. The film's view on the mentally ill is offensive by today's standards. I do not condone such behavior, nor do I forgive the film for it. However, there are many other positive aspects that I choose to focus my time on. Well, Dan is new on the job and he meets with Dr. Leo Bain, played by Pleasance. Dr. Leo is an eccentric doctor who has a free roam policy. While many other doctors and psychiatrists want to lock up those struggling mentally, Dr. Leo creates a safe place for them to be. It's unusual, but it gets results. Dan is replacing Dr. Merton, who took a job elsewhere. Dan is in charge of the patients on floor 3. Floor 3 is home to some real bad characters. The government has mandated that these 4 individuals be locked up, but since Dr. Leo likes the idea of an open facility, some compromises were made. There is an electronic lock system. Anytime one of the inmates gets too close to the window, the whole ward electronically shuts down and locks up. On the 3rd floor, we have the former prisoner of war, Hawk. Then we have the preacher, who set churches on fire while people were still in them. We have Fatty, the child molester, and of course we have a serial killer that goes by the name of the Bleeder. The Bleeder never wants to show his face, and his nose bleeds when committing heinous acts. All 4 of these characters are super memorable and effectively creepy. The floor 3 baddies are mad that Dr. Merton isn't their doctor anymore, and they believe that Dan Potter is the one to blame. They believe that Dan killed Dr. Merton, and they want to get revenge. Through a little distraction, they get Dan's home address. Dan's sister comes to town to stay with Dan and his family for a bit, and she claims that there is a dynamite band playing in Springwood.
Hey, there's a dynamite band that's playing Springwood this weekend.
Springwood? The Springwood from A Nightmare on Elm Street? More foreshadowing, perhaps? Well, a major blackout occurs, our 4 psychopaths escape, mayhem ensues, and our heroes are sitting ducks. Will Dan and his family survive while being trapped, alone in the dark? I love this movie so freaking much. There's plenty of tension, plenty of dark moments, plenty of funny moments, and plenty of twists and turns. Acting is phenomenal. Music is beyond serviceable, direction is promising, story is interesting and rather unique, and lighting is top tier. For being so underrated, this film is darn near perfect. It's a hidden gem for sure, but it doesn't mean that it's without flaws. Pacing can be inconsistent. Some of the twists and turns can be seen from a mile away. The depictions of mental health is hard to watch today, and admittedly, there are some slower moments, especially upon second viewing. If you are looking for a pure slasher film, you may be a bit disappointed. While we have these great villains with plenty of personality, there is very little slashing going on. If you like 80s slasher films with a little bit of a twist, or if you like home invasion films, then Alone in the Dark may be the perfect film for you. I can't believe I finally got to see this movie, and it's a beautiful film, and it definitely deserved this Blu-ray release. And that's all I have for tonight, so thank you so much for watching, and stay spooky, everyone. You made it to the end of the video? That's impressive. Thank you so much for watching. So, I had high expectations for Alone in the Dark, and they actually met my expectations. What was the last movie you were super hyped for? And it met every expectation you had. I'd love to know in the comments below. Bye.